You know, just a few days before the October 7th terrorist attacks in Israel, I was in one of my favorite cities, Calgary, because Dr. James Lindsay was giving a speech, a rather professorial speech, if I might say, about the roots of woke, of what Marxist critical theory, what cultural Marxism was all about. And I was riveted, and he spoke for about 90 minutes, and there were 1,000 people in the room. I thought, boy, he's being a little bit professorial here, a little bit high intellectual, but this populist crowd was hanging on his every word because they had never heard an explanation of where did woke come from, what is its purpose, and how can you find all these supposedly contradictory groups, but all dedicated to the revolution. But that was the point, and my eyes were so opened by that. And in that same vein, I encountered this tweet 3 days ago by a survivor of Mao's Cultural Revolution, someone who was born in the Soviet-style communism of that country. Well, I don't have to say Soviet-style. Mao had his own even worse version of communism. Here's the tweet itself. It shows Black Lives Matter flags and queers against Israel apartheid flags and Hamas flags. And She Van Fleet wrote, the same people, the same cause, the same ideology, and the same goal. And I would not have understood that were it not for the lecture that Dr. James Lindsay gave a few weeks ago now in Calgary. And so what a pleasure to have back the author of that simple but profound tweet, She Van Fleet, the author of the forthcoming book, Mao's America, A Survivor's Warning. I can hardly wait to get my hands on that book, but today we're going to talk about that very interesting tweet. She Van Fleet, great to see you again. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. Congratulations on the book, and we'll have a proper sit down where we go through the book. I want to read it first so I have some smart questions to ask about it.
Yeah,
but
thank you.
You have given us a great education on the ways of the Maoist revolution and how it is being replicated by cultural Marxism in North America. Can you explain for our viewers who maybe missed your last appearance on the show, explain how you would say that Black Lives Matter, the Pride, Queers for Palestine, and the pro-Hamas movement, how are those the same people with the same goal? Explain that for people who might not know how that could possibly be true.
Yes, some of them look kind of contradictory, but it is not. It's very consistent because it runs on the same, I call it operating system, and it's called oppressors versus oppressed. That's what I was indoctrinated, and that's how Mao carried out his revolution. And it's always, people are always divided into two. And one is the villain and the oppressor, and the other is the oppressed, the victim. And everything you look through that lens, and then you put your value based on that lens. That means black and white thinking. That means oppressors bad and oppressed good. That anything that oppressed do to the oppressor is justified. Anything. Okay, that is exactly how the revolution was carried out in China during the land reform in the early 1950s, 1951 to 1953. Mao took over China after that, and then mobilized the peasants to go against the landlord, the property class, because they were the bad guy, they were the oppressors. They confiscated their land, and then they labeled them the oppressor, and then had struggle session against them, and they beat, tortured, and killed 2 million of those landlords. Their crime? Wealth, or just they own a little bit more than their neighbor. And during the Cultural Revolution, they carry out the same principle, oppressor versus oppressed. Who are the oppressors? Now they were the teachers and the and principles, because Mao called them the reactionary bourgeois intellectual authority. So overnight, they become the enemy. And that justify for the Red Guard to go after their teachers and their principles. The first killing took place in the Cultural Revolution in 1966, was done by a group of young girls. They
Young
killed
girls, eh?
young girls from 12 to 16 from a very, very prestigious high school in Beijing. They killed their principal because their principal is labeled as the oppressor or the enemy. And actually, there's no consequence. Some of the killers, because they're from the elite school and they're from the elite family, some of them immigrate to America and enjoying the American dream. And their principal, no justice. And that's exactly what I see happening in America, especially today on our streets and on campuses. Through the same lens, they had the same way of thinking, black and white. Oppressors, bad. Oppressed, good. Anything is justified. That include killing, raping, and kidnapping, because that's done to the oppressed, by the press to the oppressor. Same ideology, same people. Why could they do that? Because they're from the same indoctrination mills. And the Red Guards, they were indoctrinated by the CCP. And here, they were indoctrinated by the Marxist-run universities and the secondary schools. That's how they think the same.
You know, it was amazing to hear Dr. James Lindsay's speech, and he compared the Red Guard, which was young people, as you point out,
Young people.
and he compared it to the Green Guard, which is what he called environmental extremists, including Greta Thunberg, and he also talked about the Rainbow Guard, which would be the critical gender theory, queer theory. And that's how it can make sense, because we see these queers for Palestine, and I keep thinking, in Hamas-controlled Gaza, if you're gay, there are no transgender people who go out and about in drag. They would be thrown off the top of apartment buildings. That's how they're treated. So I keep thinking, how on earth could you be an out-of-the-closet, flamboyant gay man or woman supporting a regime that believes that you should be murdered for your homosexuality? And the only possible answer is both regard themselves as oppressed people who would do anything to get the oppressor, and so they're all for revolution. You know, homosexuality or environmentalism or Hamas or Black Lives Matter, those are just different variations on the theme being revolution. Is that, I mean, that once I heard that, it clicked.
Can I explain a little bit more? So why you think that it makes sense that, you know, the same people that decry a misgendering, a simple misgendering, sometimes it's honest misgendering, they consider that crime. They consider that actual violence. And then in front of this real atrocity, they justify. If you put that lens and then look at things, that make perfect sense. And when I say the same goal, what's the goal? Who is the ultimate oppressor? That's the United States of America. And that's their after. That's their real goal. They want to dismantle this country and dismantle capitalism, the free market. That's their goal. So everything else put together, simple, communism. And that's something I experienced. And that's exactly what's going on here with a little bit different variation. But the same is the same.
And I guess that's why there's such a push from the left, including from the media, to doubt and raise skepticism about the torture of these Israeli victims, to say, oh, it didn't happen, it's fake news. We interviewed a young woman in Mississauga who said, it's completely not true, Hamas would never do any of those things, But if they did, it was totally justified. Like, it was an amazing psychological trick she did. But I guess the reason they have to say that is because if they admit that their side did the raping, murdering, torturing, kidnapping, then, you know, maybe the Israelis and the Jews were the oppressed and not the oppressors. So they have to force things back. Well, they were the oppressors, and that's why it was justified against them, because you're allowed to murder an oppressor, even if that oppressor is like a 2-year-old baby. It's shocking to see what this looks like in real life, but I guess that's how it was in communist China. There were atrocities.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that. I mean, you already said 14, 15, 16-year-old girls murdered their school principal. Was violence the way? I mean, how many people were killed in these sort of oppressor versus oppressed, or oppressed versus oppressor Marxist battles?
Millions. And I can tell you one story, maybe relate more to what happened in Israel. Okay, during the Cultural Revolution in October of 1966, that's the beginning of the Red Guards movement. They killed 1,700 people in Beijing, but that's not enough. They went on to the neighboring county, and they went to 48 villages and killed those former oppressors, meaning those people that used to own land or their parents used to own land. They killed hundreds of them. They tortured them, and they split little baby into halves.
Oh my God.
And for what? For what? For one thing, the ideology tells them those were enemies. Anything done to them is justified. So I have to tell Americans, the first step to commit violence like those Red Guards did is to accept, justify, and celebrate violence. That's what we see on American campuses. That's what we see on the streets. And that is not a warning. That is violence coming in the near future if we don't stop it.